Okay, here we are in chapter 8, and we're progressing along. And we're going to hit a new kind of verb. It's called a reflexive verb. And it's got two, as far as its form goes, it's got a new little bit that we haven't seen before. It's got a reflexive pronoun that goes in front of the verb and after the subject pronoun. So we've got, we're going to have a subject for each verb. We're going to have the conjugated verb. And then we're going to have this little reflexive pronoun. And on the first page of chapter 8, there's a whole list of the forms of this pronoun that go with the different subject pronouns. So it's je me, tu te, elle, se, nous, vous, and il, elle, plural, se. Same form for the for the plural and the singular in the third person. Otherwise, the verb conjugates just the same in relation to the to its subject as we've seen so far in the present and in at least in the present. So we've got this extra part. Elle se lave. Now, the meaning is, in English this is a little counterintuitive to us, because in a lot of places where we just use an intransitive verb, that is a verb without a direct object, the French will stick in a direct object to show that the person is doing it, the subject is doing this action to him or her or itself. So, elle se lave. Laver, it's a regular ER verb that means to wash. She washes herself. In English, we would frequently say, she's washing. What is she doing? She's washing. In French, you would say, elle se lave. So here it is as a direct object. The se is a direct object. This is the subject, the verb, and the direct object. Here, in French, for parts of your body, you frequently just use the definite pronoun. And then if you want to indicate possession, you'll often use a reflexive verb. So, elle se lave les mains. She washes the hands to herself. She washes the hands to herself. So that's we know it's that way we know it's her hands. But notice a little grammatical issue here. In this one, the reflexive pronoun is the direct object. In this example, it's les mains that are the direct object. She's washing the hands to herself. Okay? So this is an indirect object. This will be more important when we get into the past indefinite. Okay? A couple of things to observe with reflexive verbs. First, that they conjugate with être, the auxiliary verb être in the past indefinite. No matter what they are in the present, whether they take être or avoir as reflexive verbs, they're going to take être in the past indefinite. And so we get elle s'est lavée. She washed herself, or she washed. The other issue here is that in the past indefinite, with the direct object, we've got an issue of agreement between the past participle and the direct object. Okay? We've already seen this in chapter 5, and I gave you a rule about this. That is, in the past indefinite, the past participle agrees in number and gender with the direct object if the direct object precedes the verb. Now, it's the same rule for reflexive verbs. The book tells you something different. Do not believe the book. The book is, it's not exactly wrong, but it's not a good way of going about it, and it will lead you astray. So believe me, do not believe the book, and I put this out on the handout so that you can review it. Elle s'est lavée. She washed herself. We've got in the past indefinite this se. She washed herself. It's the direct object. It's coming off of the subject pronoun, which is elle, which is third person, singular and feminine. So it's third person, singular and feminine. And it's in front of the verb. So we have an agreement here. This is getting its number, gender, and person from its antecedent, elle. And since it's a direct object preceding the verb, it's going to go and create an agreement with the past participle. Okay. Now we're going to get a slightly different example. This one. We're going to put this sentence into the past indefinite. Elle s'est lavé les mains. She washed her hands. We've got the être, auxiliary verb, for the past indefinite, because that's what we use with reflexive verbs. And we've got the reflexive pronoun in front of the verb, but we notice we don't have any agreement. Why is that? This, sure, it's getting its number, gender, and person from its antecedent elle, so this is third person, singular, feminine. But we have no agreement. Why is that? That's because the direct object is les mains, not elle or ce. And it's after the verb. Since it's after the verb, there's no agreement. So that's why you need to be attentive to whether this is a direct object or an indirect object. Let's look at another example of this. Ils se sont écrits des lettres. Écrire is to write. They wrote each other letters. Okay? This se is coming off of il, so it's masculine, plural, and third person. We've got the auxiliary être, because it's a reflexive verb in the past indefinite. We've got the past participle for écrire, to write. And we notice that it does not, in fact, agree with il. Why? There's no S on the end. Why? That's because the direct object is des lettres. They wrote letters to each other. So this is, in fact, an indirect object. You write to someone. You write something to someone. The something you write is the direct object. The to someone is the indirect object. Notice, again, that we've got être. Now we're going to use a direct object pronoun to replace des lettres. Okay, so since it's coming from des lettres, it's feminine plural. Ils se les sont écrites. The direct object is les here. It's in front of the verb, so it's going to create an agreement. Feminine plural, direct object, in front of the verb, we get an agreement there. And the one other point that I want to make about this particular sentence is that when you have a plural subject in reflexive verbs, it can often mean reciprocal action. They did something to each other. It's not like everybody wrote him or herself individually a letter. It's they wrote to each other. Ils se sont écrits des lettres. They wrote letters to each other. So that's pretty much the hardest part of this chapter. There's some stuff on disjunctive pronouns that may be a little tricky, but we can talk about that in the forum if you've got questions. Okay.